Swear.
Baruch Hashem and Baruch Haba. Welcome to our advanced studies here at Congregation Mashiach Yisrael. My name is Scott Siskin, and tonight we're going to be studying our beloved Tanya, Perek Mem Tet, chapter 49. Mi yiftach Tanya b'tafilu uvracha. Who would like to open us with prayer and a blessing?
Abby, thank you that you give us the opportunity once again and every week, freely, where so many people around the world don't even have the opportunity to do this or get persecuted for it, to come and learn more about you, to learn your ways, how you created things, how you want things to be. And in that, we get closer and closer to you, just like that candle Jew. We reach and reach and reach, always trying to reach higher, always trying to reach you, always trying to get more of you in our lives. And then once we get it, help us to bring it back down to earth and incorporate it in our lives and in the lives of everybody around us. In Yeshua's name we pray.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
So tonight we're chaptering study 49. We're studying chapter 49 this evening. It's worthwhile to say, that's the wrong side, there you go, that's better. It's worthwhile to bring up that this portion, we are studying the Tanya out of order here so that we have a chance to thoroughly look a little bit more in depth into each chapter. So we're kind of going off our own pace here as opposed to the regular yearly schedule, but we're kind of coming back close to where we were. And it's worth pointing out that on a regular year, and even on a leap year, this chapter is read during the 18th of Iyar. Does anyone know why that day is important? The 33rd day of counting the Omer. That's Lag Bomer. Mm-hmm. Lag Bomer is a special day in Judaism, in Chassidus, in Kabbalah, because the 33rd day of the Omer, Lag BaOmer, is the day, as we are told, that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Rabbi, the one who penned the Zohar, he was in the cave for 13 years, and God taught him and his son the Zohar, and they had him write it down, that this was the day that the Zohar was revealed to humanity, to the Jews, to the Jewish people. And that's why it's very special. Lag BaOmer is kind of the birthday of Chassidus, the birthday of Kabbalah, if you will. Interestingly enough,
Birthday of the Zohar.
Birthday of the Zohar. I believe this is also the day of passing of the Rabbi. And as such, it's important again to take a note that Chassidus is essentially taking the Kabbalistic ideas, which are too complex and too lofty for us to digest in a normal way, and breaking them and bringing them down to a level where we can comprehend them and actually use them in our practical lives and our understanding to actually get closer to God. Of course, we study through Chabad, which of course is the paradigm or the methodology of Chochmah Bina V'Dat, that we should use our wisdom, our understanding, and our knowledge to be able to understand these concepts, to develop an emotional response. That's the Da'at part. And then we can change the way that we think and feel over time. This is the long, shorter way of Tanya. This is how we can connect to God, by changing the way we think and changing the way we feel. Again, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And this is all contained in the concept of Lag BaOmer. So today, and this chapter specifically, is a very special chapter. Interestingly enough, we're also talking about the love and fear of God. As we know from our handy-dandy map of Tanya, we're in our 10-chapter marathon talking about love and fear of God. And last week, we studied about, well, let's back up to 2 weeks ago. In chapters 46 and 47, we discussed the concepts of reciprocal love, right? That God has done so much for us. How much more should we do for God? Because, like it says in Psalm 113, in the beginning of the Hallel, God lifted us, the poor and the destitute, from the dunghill. He picked us up from a lowly trash heap, and he takes us, as Rabbi Gordon says, in his Mercedes-Benz chariot. And he takes us to the palace, and he sets us up with a shower and food and a bank account and clothing. And the king brings us into his personal chamber and says, I'm going to marry you. You're going to be with me for everything. Everything's going to be fine. And this is an amazing thing that God has done for us. In general, and specifically to the Jewish people, talking about us taking us out of Egypt, and as we'll soon see today, in general, just by God creating the world. So how much should we reciprocate that love for God? As King Zalman says, as water reflects a face, so also the heart of man reflects man. This is natural nature for us. If we can think like this, then we can awaken a fiery love and awe and respect of God. Chapter 49 comes off of the heels of chapter 48. Last week we talked about the concept of tzimtzum. The concept of tzimtzum is the concept of contraction, that God takes his infinite, amazing, powerful, wonderful, miraculous energy, and he filters it, and he contracts it, and he confines it, and he conceals it, and he turns it from a blazing sun to a little laser beam. And that little laser beam of God's energy, so to speak, is what creates our whole existence. So God takes all of his majesty and hides it all, specifically so that he can create a world which is finite and not infinite, so that we could be here, people with physical bodies, souls and physical bodies, that we should be able to take the mundane physical aspects of this world and turn it again into something infinite. This is essentially the purpose of creation. Exodus 25, verse 8, have them build me a sanctuary so that I can dwell among them, within them. This is the concept of dira betachtonim, that we should create a dwelling place for God down here in the lower realms, or in the lower world, that each mitzvah that we do creates our world to come, our marital home with God forever in the world to come. So that's essentially what we're going to be studying tonight.
The process is also called tikkun.
Tikkun olam. This is exactly the same thing. So that was tzimtzum.
Well, mitzvahs aren't.
Mitzvahs are tikkun olam. Absolutely.
Tikkun olam is correcting your...
The world, one mitzvah at a time.
One mitzvah at a time. That's why we each have our own personal mitzvah. As it says, that we each have a special mitzvah that makes us, I believe the word is it lahaz here? Or, I believe the root word is zohar, right? What does zohar mean but radiance, shining, brilliance, right? Zohar. There's a certain mitzvah that is the zohar for each one of us, in the sense that it makes us shine. It makes us radiate godly light. It makes us brilliant. And this is our special mitzvah. This is our tikkun, right? Now, that doesn't mean just because we each have an individual personal tikkun that we should focus just on, let's say mine's tzitzit, for example. My personal tikkun is tzitzit. And whatever I do with the tzitzit, that's what makes my little piece of the world a godly place, and it's what vitalizes all the rest of my mitzvah, Baruch Hashem. That doesn't mean I just do tzitzit. Right? You do all 613 commandments. We're obligated to all of them. But there's one that's the source that makes you shine. Right?
Spent Sunday afternoon making new tzitzit.
Hey,
Huh?
beautiful, huh? Yafa. Very nice. And parenthetically, if you want a little bit more on that, how do you tell what's your personal mitzvah? The one that makes you shine? It's whichever is most difficult for you. That's how you could tell that it's yours. And because you could tell that it's yours, that's how you could also tell that you're able to do it, because God gave it to you. So, back to chapter 49 tonight. Last week we talked about tzimtzum, contraction, concealment of God's infinite energy. Today, chapter 49.
In another place in the intro, instead of describing it as contraction and concealment, it actually used the word refraction and concealment.
Absolutely. Well, I've heard it described like that before. Like if the light of God, right, is the light that creates us, which is true.
Sort of like a, what do you call it?
Like a prism.
Prism, yeah.
So if God's light is like the sun, then the sun comes through the vacuum of space, and it comes through our atmosphere, and it comes down to the ground, and from the ground it reflects through the window here, and from the window it reflects to the wall, and from the wall down the hall, and down the hall under a crack, and from that crack against another wall, and then we're over here somewhere in this dark room. That's the light that we see. You'll have a fraction of an idea as to the divine energy that we get from the light of God as it's compared to the sun. Same concept, refraction or reflection. So yeah, in chapter 49, we're going to be studying the concept of the four worlds, Abiyah, Atzilut, Bariya, Yetzira, and Asiya, the world of emanation, the world of creation, the world of formation, and the world of action, our world. And again, this is kind of the foundation of Kabbalah, right? Which is why it's read on the 18th day of Iyar, which is Lag Bomer. The concept that God creates the world, he uses tzimtzum, he contracts his divine energy, making himself more and more finite, so that we could actually be physical people in physical bodies with spiritual souls that can connect to God without being totally annihilated and blown away. This is such an amazing effort that God goes through. How much more should we reflect that reciprocal love? How much more should we show that reciprocal love by acknowledging that which God does for us, and then therefore revealing the love that's within us in a fiery and passionate way? That's kind of the direction for chapter 49. And again, the whole concept of the four worlds is kind of the primer on Kabbalah.
That you're using as a metaphor.
Yes.
Intense.
Something that you could feel, right?
Because we could also think of that when we're talking about or in Sof.
Right.
Fiery, if you were too close, would be a different kind of intensity.
Right. And that's the concept of Ratzoi V'Shuv, right? That we got to be fiery, passionate towards God, but then remember to come back down here and actually do a mitzvah with that energy. Do tikkun olam with that energy. And this, again, is kind of the primer of Kabbalah. A lot of this information comes from, I believe, Eitz Chaim. Eitz Chaim is a work by the Arizal, one of the primary works. Again, the Arizal didn't write anything. He only taught orally for 2-3 years before his early passing. His chief student, Rabbi Chaim Vital, wrote all of his stuff down, or a lot of his stuff down. One of the primary works is Eitz Chaim. Eitz Chaim is a Kabbalistic book that talks about the spiritual workings of the heavens. There's another book that comes after called Pri Eitz Chaim, The Fruit of the Tree of Life, which talks about the spiritual workings of this world, Asiya. So, without any more introduction, let's just go ahead and take a look at the text itself.
There was a footnote like that in the intro, where it said that in the Tanya,
Mhm.
he only goes into some of these concepts a little bit
Right.
for a greater and more
In depth.
in-depth, to go there.
You should go to Eitz Chaim and Pri Eitz Chaim. Again, lofty works. All right, so we're in chapter 49. The page is 256 from the bottom of the right column. The chapter title for this week's chapter, for chapter 49, from our handy-dandy map of Tanya, our beloved map of Tanya, is called Reciprocating Love 2. Remember, Reciprocating Love 1 was chapter 46, I believe. Is that right? That's right. And we talked about the daily exodus and Tzimtzum from infinite to finite, and now we're back at Reciprocating Love 2. Look at all this energy, look at all this stuff that God did with the Tzimtzum, how much energy and effort and bother he took to be able to make us so that we should be able to do his will. How much more should we love him as a result? The short summary is, creation was for the sake of a physical world where Jews could do mitzvot. That's why God created the world. If God contracted his light for us, how much more should we forego our own comforts for him? Again, God's infinite energy, he hid it all. He tucked it all away. He concealed all of it. Specifically so he could have this relationship with us. How much more should we tuck away all of our baggage and connect to him as he wants? Yeah? And I believe that this applies as well to the concept of Gentiles performing the 7 Noahide laws as well. That God should be able to have a relationship with his creation, I think, is the fundamental principle that we're pointing at here. Chapter 49. Even though the particular aspects of the nature of the occultation and concealment of the light of the Ein Sof Yisbarach, the Infinite One, blessed be He, we spoke last week at length in chapter 48 about the concept of Tzimtzum, that God sends forth his energy and then pulls it back in this oscillating sort of form, almost like an AC current, and he uses this to conceal himself so that he shouldn't blast us away with all his magnificent energy, but we should get a filtered little taste of it so that we don't turn on the light bulb or turn on the switch and the light bulb bursts. We shouldn't turn on the faucet and the pipes explode. We just need a little bit, right?
So we don't get more than we can actually
Tolerate.
tolerate, right?
And hence be annihilated as a result, which is exactly why God said to Moshe Rabbeinu on Mount Sinai, no one could see my face and live.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In the descent of the worlds, until this material world itself was created, are too numerous to count. What's too numerous to count? All of the tzimtzumim. All of the tzimtzumim. We talked before about tzimtzum, this concept of contraction, of concealment, and we said that there are how many tzimtzum? How many tzimtzumim, rather? Innumerable. Many, many mucho, right? Mucho. Billions and trillions and millions and all kinds of other illions that are out there. Too numerous to count, and are of many diverse kinds. Many diverse kinds, meaning not just, one tzimtzum gets you this level of concealment and the other one's just like it, but many quantitatively and quantitatively, right? Mm-hmm. There's some big tzimtzumim and there's some little tzimtzumim. There are billions and trillions of tzimtzumim as well. By the time it gets that way, you get away from infinite energy and it looks like a physical world, right?
It is noted that the first one, the very first, which resulted in the secondary world below Atzilut of Berea, was a leap, a big.
It's the largest tzimtzum, right? Mm-hmm. Which kind of makes practical sense. I mean, we're not talking like that heavily into tzimtzum tonight, but it kind of makes sense. How do you get from, what's the first step from infinite to finite? A really big contraction. How big is really big? Compared to infinite, nothing's big. Right. So it takes an infinite contraction to be able to do that. That's the biggest one.
To move from the spiritual to physical.
And that's how you get from an infinite Atzilut, where everything is God, to finite Bria, where everything is finite. There are people's souls there, right? Angels live there. On the outside. And this,
of what?
outside of the palaces, as we studied before. As is known who have tasted of the Eitz Chaim, the tree of life. In general, this means Kabbalah. Those who know a little bit about Kabbalah know the difference between Atzilut and Bria, right? And that's kind of what we're getting into tonight. But if you want to go more specific, again, a lot of this information is taken from Chaim Vital's work based on the Arizal of Eitz Chaim and Pri Eitz Chaim. Which again, Eitz Chaim talks about the spiritual workings of the heavens, Pri Eitz Chaim about the spiritual workings of earth, in a very, very rough nutshell. Yet in general, there are 3 levels of powerful, comprehensive tzimtzumim, contractions. So we say, how many contractions, how many tzimtzumim are there? Infinite. Some are really strong, some are not so strong. What are the big ones? The 3 big ones that we kind of chop everything up into these categories. And I don't have my sheet with me, but, well, that's okay. The 3 big contractions are the ones that separate the 4 different worlds, right? I'm going to get it out.
500 years each that separates us.
Well, kind of, but when you get to Atzilut, it's not exactly that way anymore because it's infinite, right?
Right.
Sorry for the delay.
Oh, what you're looking for is...
Sorry, that was yours and I just wrinkled it
It's all right. I'm gonna get over it.
1,000 times.
Do you have a backup copy?
I think we should make big poster boards like them.
There we go.
I just read a million more things to write on them.
I didn't actually get it laminated, but I did.
That's okay.
Put it in a percent.
So we have this handy dandy diagram that we've used before. And all of these are a little bit weird, I guess. But
What
that's okay.
chapter did we do? What do you mean weird? I don't know what you're talking
Some of the ones behind here, that's okay.
about.
So
This has got a little bit of some
that's fine. When we
color
talk about this, hopefully you can see this okay. What are the 3 big contractions that we're talking about? The 3 horizontal lines there. I know there's a lot on this page, but
The Malkut of Atzilut.
right there's the.
Doesn't have much.
There you go. A little bit
That's a
cleaner.
Oh, you got a
You want to
clean
pass that to her?
copy.
Thank you. Here you go.
Listen, I think this
So this one's a little bit cleaner. Notes are good. Notes keep us smart. So the first big contraction is from Atzilut too.
Expand our understanding of knowledge,
Absolutely.
yes.
So the 3 big contractions the Alter Rebbe is talking about here are these 3 lines, the ones that separate the 4 worlds. Okay. So when the Alter Rebbe says, yet there are 3 levels of powerful, comprehensive contractions, he's talking about these 3 lines, the ones that separate Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, and Nasiya. Kosh?
And they're all at Malkut.
Thank you,
Right.
Yaakov.
Is it, and they're all at Malkut.
Well, you could say they're all at Malkut, or they're all at Ketzir.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
So yes, they all come up in that format, and we're not really going too far into Sphira tonight, but let's focus on the worlds. 3 comprehensive worlds, and again, there's millions and billions and an infinite number of contractions, because God's infinite. So within each of those 4 worlds, there's going to be infinite levels. And a good way I like to think about this is when God talks about saving a life, or God forbid, taking a life. When Cain killed Abel, for example, you take away an entire world, says God. Each person to me is like an entire world. Okay, you could say that literally because Cain was like one of the first people. So imagine how many billions of people would have been his seed. It just never got to happen. But on a more philosophical, Kabbalistic, spiritual level, everybody relates to God in their own way. If I relate to God in a different way than any of you, that's my own little world, right? That's on a different level of tzimtzum. And again, it's not something huge like the tzimtzum that occurs between Yetzirah and Asiya, but it's personal for me. So there's billions and millions, as much as there are creations, right? Of ways that creation relates to God. So there's these 3 powerful contractions giving rise to 3 comprehensive worlds. The 3 worlds are Beriah, the world of creation, Yetzirah, the world of formation, and Asiya, the world of action. Each category consisting of myriads upon myriads of particulars, right? 3 generalities, billions of particulars. These 3 worlds are the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, as I just said. For the world of Atzilut, why are we mentioning the world of Atzilut, the highest world? It's God itself. It's godliness itself.
And why are we mentioning Asiya? Because that's the physical world.
Mm-hmm.
That's our world.
Right.
So these 3 are the intermediate worlds. Is one reference to them was the intermediate worlds.
Okay, I guess you could say that. What we're focusing on here, I think, is how we said it before. Atzilut is infinite, less contraction. Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya are all finite, more contraction, right? More tzimtzum. So how does this happen? In order to create the world of Bria, which consists of higher souls and angels, what did we say before? It lives and exists in the world of Bria. Do you remember? Who's there right now?
Who's there?
Who's there? Like, hello, who's there? Who's there?
Abraham.
Abraham, okay. Great tzaddikim, great righteous people, right?
The
Great.
higher Gan Eden.
The higher Garden of Eden. This is where the souls of people who do what go?
Correct their tikkuns.
Okay. In what way? Naturally, instinctively, animalistically, or intelligently?
No,
Intelligent.
Intelligently.
With
Kavana.
Kavana.
With intellectually motivated emotion. That's the higher Garden of Eden. That's the people who go there. So I'm a human being, and I know enough to love God, even though I don't feel it all the time, and I do the stuff that God wants me to do, and I put the right kavana into it, even though I don't feel it all the time. This is enough to get you to the world of Bria, right? Let's say I don't know enough to love God. I just know that Bubby always says, make a bracha before you eat. I make my bracha before I eat. It's natural. It's instinctive. I'm not necessarily connecting to God through it. I get to the lower Gan Eden, the lower Garden of Eden, which is the world of Yetzirah. The world of Yetzirah is where the majority of all the angels are, right? Because angels are primarily animalistic, right? Emotional, instinctual, not necessarily not having any kind of free will, right? This is why the angels are referred to in the Bible as chayot. What's a chaya? It's an animal. It's a wild animal, like a lion.
Or a domestic animal.
That's a behemoth.
Okay.
I had basic doing mitzvah because you're supposed to.
That's
and then
fine.
you get to
Instinctual.
Mm-hmm.
Or intellectually motivated.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, the lion doesn't go to Harvard to learn to be afraid of fire. It knows don't do that, right? So that's instinctual, that's Yetzirah. Whereas we go and we understand, okay, with the concepts of this and that, I shouldn't, God forbid, pull the trigger on this gun. I don't know why that example came. But I have to learn that, right? So that would be a different kind of thing. So in order to create the world of Bria, which consists of the higher souls and angels, these are angels that serve God on an intellectual basis, so they're a higher form of angel than the angels that are in the world of Yetzirah, but they can't reach the same place as the holiness of a human soul. Human souls are far more holy than any kind of angel, and as such they sit, as we said before, on the outside of the Heichalot, the outside of the vestibules, the outside of the palaces. They like stand on the balcony and look into the souls that are relating to God inside the palaces. These are the angels we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. And their service is, whose service to God is in the sphere of Chabad, intellectual faculties, which you were saying before, seichel, right? Seichel means intellect, right? Using your brains. Use your brains and you serve God, as opposed to just instinctually, which are clothed in them and are apprehended by them, and from which they receive influence. There proceeded a powerful contraction, as mentioned above. So, that big contraction is the space between Atzilut and Bria. So we're just kind of making this map right here. And again, it's kind of interesting that this is the day that we read this, when it's Lag Bomer, when it's the 33rd day of counting the Omer, where the Zohar was revealed to all of us. We're kind of going through all of this information. It can't be a coincidence that it shows up on this day.
It actually is in about, what, a week?
Well, the portion is set to be read on that day. Again, we're studying the Tanya out of order, so we can go into more depth
But
and
I mean,
detail.
to put it in our context, our calendar.
Yeah, we're like 10 days away, 9 days away, something like that.
Is this the chapter that we originally made these? Because we should have that kind of class again. It was very informative. Or was it a different one?
It was a different one.
Okay.
The first way that we went through this, we went through a lot of information right up front.
Oh,
But we added to the map as we went all the way through all 5 books of the Tanya.
Right. Bears repeating though.
Absolutely. We were talking, perhaps after the class, about a class just on this kind of stuff.
Oh, that'd be brilliant. Very informative.
So we're just talking about coming from Atzilut, the world where everything is God and godliness. It's still infinite there. To Bria, powerful contraction. Now we call it the world of, it's not just emanation. It's not just coming off of God. It's creation. It's a different thing now. It can see itself almost as an independent entity, or practically as an independent entity. So too, the next level down, coming from Bria to Yetzirah, from the world of creation to the world of formation. For the minute portion of light, which clothes itself in the world of Bria, is still in the category of infinity. What? I thought we said Bria was finite. It's only in the category of infinity in relation to the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, and is unable to clothe itself in the latter except through contraction and this oscillation we talked about before. So too, the same is true from Yetzirah to Atzilut, which is pretty interesting if you think about it.
Again, it's speaking of perspective.
Perspective. So we say the Mishnah, Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers. They say everything is in the control of heaven except for the fear of heaven, which of course we talked before means, whether you're tall or short, whether you have lots of hair or maybe not so much, all of these things are controlled by heaven, we say, right? Is that true? Who pulls the strings of heaven?
God.
God, right? Why don't we say from God? Why do we say it's all in the hands of heaven, Shemayim, except for the fear of heaven, right? Why do we say that and not God? Why don't we reference God specifically?
You're not supposed to say his name.
That's a good enough answer.
You don't want to, what did you say? You don't want to
You don't want to
use
take his name.
How about this? When we pray, sometimes we say Avinu Shebashamayim, our Father who's in heaven, right?
Hallelujah.
What do we mean we're God who's in heaven? Where is God? We call
You're
him
there everywhere.
We call him Hamakom. He's right here, he's there, he's everywhere, up, down, right, left, and all around here, then everywhere is where it can be found. So why would we say that God's in heaven? Why do we say that?
He's there too.
He's there too? Yeah. Is that enough for us to qualify him by saying Avinu Shebashamayim?
Because Kavana.
Kavana? I would say that's a big no. That's okay.
Was there just something peering in the window?
That was fabulous. I was like, wow. Isn't it Kavana? You want to go up? You always want to
Yeah.
ascend up.
Yeah, but it's a matter of perspective. Can I see that chart once more? Toda. So when we look up, so we're like the big map, like here is you, right? Here is you.
All this is
You
not
are here.
Yeah, you are here.
It's
You look
That's
up,
us.
and there's this big contraction here, right? There's this big singularity that stops your perception of anything higher than this mark. What's that mark? Keter. It's the crown. Everything's made with chokhmah, with wisdom, which is right here. But we can't see anything higher than Keter, and we can't even really see Keter. So what do we call it? Everything above this line to us is heaven. Right? There's a lower heaven and a higher heaven, but it doesn't really matter to us because we all know that God is in control of all the heavens. For us, this is the one window we have to God. It's not like you could look through something else and be able to see God. That takes a lot of intellectual effort. You look up, you raise your eyes to heaven, right? Specifically because it's the only window we have. So for us, the highest, most godliness is like Keter of this world. It's this line, it's this contraction. Is that true in here? In here, that level which we looked at was like the heavens is the lowest part of the world of Yetzirah. So what's heaven for them? The same thing, but a little bit higher, right? And so also, as it goes up. Because the light that fills and creates the world of Asiya down here is so finite, but that light that's so finite is abundant in the world of Yetzirah. And that's true going up, right? The light that was here in Bria was great, but by the time it gets down to Yetzirah, it's just a trickle. So they want the abundant light. Where do they go? To heaven, right? Which is the place that's up, higher, through these little windows in the tzimtzumim, in the contractions. Does that make some sense?
So,
Thank you, Rabbi Yaakov.
to answer your question from that perspective, kind of, why do we consider God
In
our Father
heaven?
in heaven? Is because of the process of Tzimtzum.
Because of the process of tzimtzum. That's the
in
strongest
this
answer.
physical world, his, though it is filled with His glory, it is not in a revealed state that we can see.
No, not at all.
So we look up.
Because we know there's a higher revelation up there someplace, right? Yeah, that up there, that, yeah. And you're right. That response is a result of tzimtzumim. It wouldn't be there otherwise, right? Because we'd be able to and parenthetically, when Mashiach comes, that's why it says we're going to say Zeh Eli, right? Forgive me, Zeh Keli. That we're going to be able to point. Zeh is like pointing with a finger and say, this is my God, right? How is that going to be? Because there's not going to be any concealment anymore, right? So we'll be able to say, okay, this is heaven, this is higher heaven, but God, yeah, that's my God, right? Parenthetically enough, again, this is what the little children sang and saw at the splitting of the sea. They said, Zeh Keli, this is my God. How they knew that? It's a good question. Okay, now, we're going into a pretty good amount of depth here. The Alter Rebbe stops us and says, in the parentheses, an elaborate explanation of these three tzimtzumim, these contractions, in order to make them more accessible to our poor intellect, is given elsewhere. And again, this is what we talked about earlier, going into the different levels of Kabbalah. Actually, it's quoting Chassidus down here in Likutei Amorim, Part 2. But you can also look again into the Kabbalistic works of Eitz Chaim. Moving on. So the purpose of all these tzimtzumim, all these contractions, is the creation of the material human body. Isn't that amazing? Why does God go through all of the energy? I mean, God is infinite. He shines. He's infinite by himself. I believe it was Rabbi Manis Friedman once said, if God had not created anything, he would have been infinite, and he would have been perfect, and he would have been by himself, with no one to bother him. Why would he disturb that beautiful piece, right?
I don't know.
Why would he do it? The purpose is right here, the creation of the material human body, the physical stuff, that God wants a soul in body.
The one thing that everybody's trying to get out of.
The one thing everybody's trying to get out of. You are so absolutely right.
When it gets the intro to the Sephirot,
Mhm.
the emanations of God, which is a reflection of what we would call or form to be in our head of his attributes.
Yeah.
Right. Again, it's an approximation,
It's an allegory.
and it was for that purpose to reveal
Purple marker.
those
Yes.
emanations from himself, those attributes,
Okay.
that the physical world was created.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he's all love, but without somebody to love, you know what?
What's the point?
It's
right?
kind of a concept, right?
Why would God refract his energy into vessels
Uh-huh.
if not specifically to find a way to relate to us?
Mhm.
And again, quoting Rabbi Manis Friedman, he described it beautifully one time. He was like, in the end of the day, God says, I want you, right? If we need love, I'll create love. I'll invent love. It's not a problem. If you need me to be just and strict sometime, I'll create severity. That's fine. We can do that. Sometimes those won't work. You just need me to be compassionate and understanding. I'll create compassion. Sometimes none of that works. You just need me to be there. I'll create endurance, right? And we count the Omer now. We kind of see what God's talking about with that, right? They're all for us. It's all for us. Specifically the creation of the material human body. So is it the end of the day that God creates the human body so we just all go out and party? No. Specifically, the subjugation of the Sitra Achra. He wants us to be in physical bodies so that we can subjugate the forces of negativity in the world, the klipo, right? That we could take all of the dark stuff in the world, push it down, and raise God above it. And bring about the preeminence, the amazing advantage of light supplanting darkness. When a person elevates his divine soul and his animal soul, his vivifying soul, together with all their garments, thought and speech and deed, and all the powers of the body to God alone, as has been discussed earlier at length in chapters 35 through 7. For this is the purpose of the descent of the worlds. The descent of the worlds in Hebrew, I believe, is this word histalshalut, histalshalus.
Which literally is what?
A chain-like descent of the worlds. This, then that, then that, then that. One step after another. One link after another. So again, this is the whole purpose of creation. That God should be able to create us in physical bodies so that we should be able to shuv merah, to turn away from evil, vase tov, and to do good, which is essentially turning away from ourselves and connecting to Him. This is the purpose of all of creation. By doing this, how do we do this? You do mitzvahs, right? Doing mitzvahs accomplishes tikkun olam, which builds dira b'tachtonim, this dwelling place for God down here in the lower realms, which establishes and sets up and builds our olam haba, our world to come, our marital home with God forever. That's the purpose. That's all of it. It's right there. And it's like what? 10 words.
How did God know He was going to love us before He created us? Because He was God.
He knows all this.
I suppose that's as good an answer as anything. The angels certainly didn't know, right?
Right.
The angels had a whole tizzy fit over it.
Yeah,
They were like, the
behind
men, they're
seat
going to
fit.
sin. It's going to be a huge thing. You're going to get mad. It's going to be bad for us. Frankly, God, you should not create humans. Give us the Torah, says the angels. We'll do the Torah.
Right.
Parenthetically, it's a fun story, I think. It says that in the beginning, God asked, it says in the very beginning of the Bible, let us make man in our image, right? And there's some people who think that, oh yeah, this is God talking to a Messiah, right? No. Rashi says specifically, he's talking to the angels. Angels were created before us, just like animals were created before us, right? And God knew, who is God? He's compassionate, he's just, right? So he knew that God knew that he was going to put men, humans, above the animals, above the angels. And he knew that the angels weren't going to be too pleased about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what did he do? He consulted with them. It's like, guys, come on, let's reason together. This is going to be good for the end. And the angels, they didn't care for it at all. So it says that God called Michael, and Michael comes with this whole camp, all of the angels, right? All the myriads of angels. And this is allegory, of course, but and this is in the Medrash. But it says that Michael came before the divine throne, and God said, "I'm going to create man. What do you say, Michael?" Right? And Michael says, "Oh, God."
Knock it off, Jack.
Man's
Not
You
gonna
really think this is a good idea, right?
man's gonna sin, and he's gonna disappoint you, and it's gonna make a big mess, and there's gonna have to be a whole reparation of the world. It's not. I don't think it's a good idea, God. I don't think it's. Maybe you shouldn't do this one. So it says, allegorically speaking, of course, that God raised his little pinky from his throne, from his divine throne, and destroyed the entire camp of all of Michael's angels, leaving Michael alone. And then he called Gavriel. And Gabriel comes, and God says to Gavriel, "So I'm going to make man. What do you think?" And Gabriel's like, God. They're going to sin. It's going to be a big mess. You're going to be angry. There's going to be all these years of exile. The temple's going to get just, come on. I really don't think, you're making a big mistake, God. So God lifts up his little pinky, again, allegorically speaking. He destroys the entire camp of all of Gavriel's angels, leaving Gavriel alone. And then there's another archangel that came, and his name was Libiel.
Libiel?
Libiel, it's like the heart of God. Lev.
Oh, okay.
And, he says, "My angel, I'm going to create man. What do you think?" And he's coming with all of his troop, all of his camp of angels.
Michael, he looks at Gabriel.
And he's,
Good idea.
what does he say to God? He says, "God, whatever you decide is good." That's what's true.
How did the angels know we were going to mess it up?
Things are outside of time there, right?
All right. Beginning, middle, end.
So God said to little Libiel, he said, "I know that you think this is a gigantic mistake. And I know that it's going to be a big mess. But you know that my will is with these people. So I'm going to change your name. You're no longer going to be called Libiel. You're going to be called Raphael. And I'm going to be, your angels are going to be sent to go and heal the men when they sin. Because it's going to happen, right?" So that's kind of like one of the stories when God says, "Let us make man in our image." What's really going on behind the scene there? A lot of stuff, right? A lot of stuff. Because God is compassionate towards his creations. And there's no place an angel can't stand where a human can stand, right? We are so much more powerful than them when it comes to connecting to God.
He created the world through Yeshua. He didn't have to ask Yeshua
Torah.
as a thing.
Torah, exactly right. The Torah already speaks about men.
Right.
This is kind of similar when Moses was arguing with the angels because they didn't want him to take the Torah down when he was on Mount Sinai. So God says, "Grab a hold of my throne and answer them." Moses is like, they're breathing fire. No, I shouldn't. And he's like, "Grab the throne, it'll protect you." And what does Moses say to the angels? He says, "You guys want the Torah? What does it say in the Torah?" And Moses says, "Ani Hashem Elokecha, I am God, your God, who took you out of Egypt." Did God take you out of Egypt, angels? And then he says, he sees the going's good, right? So he's like, what else does it say? He says, "Don't have idols." Do you have idolatrous neighbors that you should learn from them, angels? You know who God is, right? What else does it say?
We all know.
Yeah, right? So the Torah is all about men. So why would you need to ask the Torah if we should make men, right? Anyways, where were we?
That's right. To quote.
To quote again, so this is the whole purpose of creation. God makes all the tzimtzumim. He conceals all of his magnificent, beautiful, divine energy so that just a little trickle comes through, and that trickle is what creates us, so we can live here and not be able to see him at all, in order that we should be able to push away the darkness and reflect the light back to him and make the world a godly place, do tikkun olam, by doing the mitzvahs, and establish olam haba, our world to come, our marital home with God forever. To quote again, so how should that make us feel, right? That knowledge which you just have now, this chen, this chokhmah nistarot, this hidden wisdom, this Kabbalah, what should you feel now? And this is the methodology of Chabad. Let me tell you how it is so that you can understand it, and then you'll develop an emotion on it, and maybe you'll be better tomorrow. May God help us. To quote again, as water mirrors the reflection of a face, this is Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon's word, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu has, as it were, the Holy One, blessed be He, laid down and set aside, figuratively speaking, His great infinite light, and stored it away and concealed it by means of 3 different kinds of massive contractions to create these 4 universes. The higher heavens, the lower heavens, us. And all this because of His love for lowly man, in order to raise him up to God. For love impels the flesh. They say in Chassidus, there's a statement, you'll never do anything that you don't want to do for anybody else, unless you love that person or you're afraid of that person. They say, hey, would you go to the store for me? You say, go yourself, right? Unless you love that person, or if, God forbid, you're afraid of that person. How much more, and an infinite number of times more, is it fitting that man also should relinquish and set aside all he possesses? Remember, God concealed all of his light so that he could love us and we could love him. So how much more so should we set aside all that we possess, both spiritually and physically, to renounce everything in order to cleave to him? Yisbarach, blessed be he, with attachment and desire, with a longing, and without any hindrance, within or without. A lot of our hang-ups when it comes to loving God are internal, come from within. Mm-hmm. Neither of the body, nor the soul, nor money, nor wife, nor children. And this takes us very similar. What's that like? Your love, your heart, your soul, your might. This is taking us to the Shema. Excuse me. Thereby will be understood the true reason and the meaning of the rabbinical enactment ordaining the recitations of the blessings of the Shema. You know that you have to say the Shema pamayim b'chol yom, twice every day, right? In the morning and in the evening. This is when you say the Shema. But when you say the Shema, do you just say Shema Yisrael? Or there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes before it. What's all that stuff in our Siddur, in our prayer book? Even when we have our services here, right? The blessings of the Shema. Where did they come from? They're certainly not in the Bible, right? They were placed there by the men of the Great Assembly, by Ezra the scribe, and by Malachi, and Zechariah, and Mordechai, and Daniel, and all these people. Why did they put them there? These blessings, two preceding the Shema, and in the morning, one after the Shema. In the evening, it's two after the Shema. 7 blessings total for the day surrounding the Shema. Always 2 before. In the morning, 1 after. In the evening, 2 after. For it would appear at first glance that they have no connection whatsoever with the recital of the Shema. What exactly do these blessings say? Blessed are you, God, Borei Ma'oros, that you created the lights, the luminaries. That's weird. Blessed are you, God, who chooses his people Israel with love. Okay, what does this have to do with Shema? Or, blessed are you, God, Gal Yisrael, you redeemed Israel. Okay. You spread your shelter of peace over us. Okay. What does all this have to do with the Shema? Why did the sages put this here? And this has been brought up before by the sages, as the Rashba and other codifiers have stated. Why then were they termed blessings of the Shema, and why are they ordained to be recited specifically before it? And now we're going to be focusing specifically, it seems, on the blessings before the Shema, and I believe it's specifically the blessing Borei Ma'orot, the blessed are you God who creates the luminaries. Do we have an idea as to what that is real quick before we move on? We say Shema in the morning, we have the Bazooka de Zimmer, the verses of praise, we say Psalm 145 through Psalm 150, we say Az Yashir, and then we go into the blessing of the Shema, we say Baruch Atah Hashem, Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech, you create light and create darkness, you make peace and you create all things, and then it starts talking about what? This is a test. What's it talk about in the blessing for Shema? Give me a for instance. What's it say? That's cheating. Page 39.
49?
39. Real quick.
39. Question again was?
What do the blessings before the Shema talk about? Specifically the Borei Ma'orot one, which is what you're reading there up until just before the Shema, pretty much. What's it talking about?
Blessed are you, King of the universe, who forms light, creates darkness, makes peace, creates all things in his mercy.
Says he makes things new every day. Skip to the end of that page.
Right. In his goodness he renews each day, continues to the work of creation.
What's at the end of that page?
Great in knowledge, prepared and made the radiance of the sun, the beneficent one created glory for his name, set the luminaries around his majesty.
Luminaries.
These are the angels, right?
Angels. Skip the page. Next page. Give us a little more, real quick.
For they, the light-giving luminaries you have created, will glorify you forever.
Titbarech Netzach. Beacon eternally blessed.
And whose ministering angels
create ministering
all
angels.
stand in the heights of the universe and proclaim in awe aloud in unison the words of the living God, sovereign of the universe. All of them are beloved, pure, mighty,
Kulam
holy.
ahuvim, kulam gaburim, kulam kadoshim. They're all holy. They're strong. They're magnificent. These angels, they're crazy. They're worshiping God.
And they're crazy.
They're singing.
Crazy.
All right, maybe that's my word. And what do? They're crying
Worship
one
God.
to another, and they say Zel
Kadosh,
Zeh.
kadosh, kadosh.
They say Kadosh
They
Kadosh.
open
They're
their
looking for
mouths to
God,
holiness
right?
and purity
Yeah.
with song and melody. Bless and adore, glorify and revere, hallow and ascribe sovereignty to the name of the Almighty God, the great, powerful, all-inspiring King. Holy is He.
Holy is He.
They take upon themselves the yoke of heavenly kingship.
Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shemayim.
The angels take upon themselves the yoke of heavenly kingship.
Absolutely.
Okay, this is not the same yoke.
It looks a little different for them, sure.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I think we get the idea, right? What's the blessings before the Shema talking about? Short answer: angels. Kosh. Moving on.
And
Yeah.
then it goes on to holy, holy, holy.
Right.
The whole earth is full of His glory, and blessed be the glory of the Lord from His abiding place.
We should study the Siddur, yeah?
Organized.
It's got lots of interesting stuff for us to learn. So why did the sages put the blessings before the Shema before the Shema? Why do we have to talk about angels before we read the Shema? That's what question was asked by the Rashba. Kosh? Okay.
You know, after that, there's an amen, and then even before we get to the Shema, there's this beautiful prayer.
But that one's not talking about angels anymore.
No, it's not. It's our relationship to Him.
Right. So let's crawl before we fly. Yeah.
Okay. That's a beautiful prayer.
It is beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful.
That's just before the Shema.
We're going to hit that. But let's stick with the angels bit for a second. Why do we talk about angels? The reason is that the essence of the recital of the Shema is to fulfill the injunction. How do you love God with all your heart? Specifically, by saying the Shema, right? By making the steps. You know, Fiddler, right? Do you love me? Do I what?
With both of your natures.
You don't have love. You can't hold to love. You need to make love, right? How do you make love? By doing things, right?
Action.
Like again, Rabbi Manis Friedman says, counseling a couple, you know. I got her tickets to Paris. You want to go to Paris. She wants you to take out the garbage, right? Do what she wants, right? So we are making love with God, essentially, by saying Shema, and we're fulfilling the injunction, B'chol Lavavcha. And B'chol Lavavcha, just a quick Hebrew lesson here. How do you say with all of your heart in Hebrew? Modern Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, same. How do you say with all your heart? B'chol Libcha. B'chol Libcha. What do we say in the Shema? What do we say in the Bible? B'chol Lavavcha. There's an extra base in there. There's an extra bet in there. Why is that bet in there? Because it's really trying to say
Two natures.
two. There's an extra nature here, right? With both of your hearts. That's odd, right? How many hearts does a man have, right?
An animal
Evil
soul
one and a
and
nice one.
a godless part.
This refers to both your natures, says the next line. Namely, with both your natures. There's a side of us that wants to connect to God. Very easy, b'chol lavavcha, for that, right? But what about the side that wants to just serve ourselves, our selfish animal side? That side has better things to do, right? Places to go, people to see.
You'd think so.
You'd think, right? There's actually a beautiful talk, I believe it was by Rabbi Moshe New, talking about the way that you can accomplish loving God with your animal soul. Very beautiful talk. Maybe we'll speak about it when we get to Deuteronomy. That is to say, to overcome anything that deters from the love of God. It's one of the methods you can love God with your animal soul, recognizing the stuff that it wants to pull away from and shutting yourself off to that stuff. Another way is channeling that stuff. A deeper way is through guilt. We'll talk about it later.
If you're a Jewish mama, yeah.
Yeah, right? Plenty of that going around.
Yeah, I'm
Four.
watching you, Bob.
For your heart alludes to your wife and your children. Where is your heart? To whom a man's heart is by his very nature bound. So have the rabbis of blessed memory commented on the verses, for he spoke and it came to be. Excuse me, that this refers to the wife. He commanded it and endured. This refers to the children. And b'chol nafshecha and b'chol meodecha, all your soul and all your might. It's understood literally for your life and sustenance, renouncing everything for the love of God. Rashi describes b'chol meodecha, with all of your muchness, as referring to financial, right? With all your cash, right? With everything that is your increase. Everything that you have that's your increase. That's what you should serve God with. But how can a physical man attain this level? It is therefore to this end that the blessing Yotzer Or was introduced first. How did the blessing before the Shema start? Baruch atah Hashem Yotzer Or Uvorech Choshech, who forms light and creates darkness, was introduced first. For in this blessing there is said and repeated at length the account and the order of the angels, standing in the heights of the universe, Barum Olam, in order to proclaim the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He. How all of them are nullified in His light. They say we're looking for God. What do the angels say when they look for God? We spoke about this last week or the other week in Kadoshim. They say, Kadosh, Kadosh. God's separate. He's not here, right? Where is God? Mim Komo. Blessed is God from wherever His place is, right? Because He's not here. He's too big to be just here. In order to proclaim the greatness of the Holy One, how all of them are nullified in His light, blessed be He, and proclaim in awe and hallow, declaring in reverence, Kadosh, meaning that He is apart from them, and He does not clothe Himself in them in a revealed state. Excuse me.
Would you like more, but
I'm good, thank you.
But
They're not clothed in Him in a revealed state, but Milo Chol Haaretz Kavodo, the whole earth is full of His glory. Namely, what's on the earth? The angels, right? That's where the angels live. They're all on earth. Men live on earth. Humans live on earth. The Jewish people, Israel, the olive tree lives below on earth. That's where God is. When they say, we say it on Shabbat, right? When we say the Kedusha for Shabbat, we say, Eya Makom. The angels are asked, where is the place of His glory? We're trying to look for God. Where are we going to find it? Kadosh is not here. Where is it? They say, Melo Chol Haaretz Kavodo, the whole earth is full of His glory. Specifically, God chose to set aside the angels, powerful, beloved, holy as they are, and to rest with the Jewish people, right? You could follow right along in the Siddur. This is exactly where we're going. Glad you brought it. So too the Ophanim. Who are the Ophanim? These are the level of angels a little bit lower than the Chayot and the Seraphim. They're called Ophanim. They're the wheels. Right? We read Isaiah 6 and Ezekiel 1. We talk about the wheels. These are the angels that are referred to as wheels. And the Chayot HaKodesh, the holy Chayot, the Chayot are the ones with the faces and the wings. These are your archangels, Michael and Gabriel and Raphael. They say,
Uriel is an archangel too, as well.
Is up there, right? I believe the Book of Enoch lists 7 archangels. They say, what do they all say? The Chayot HaKodesh and the Ophanim, they all say, Baruch Kavod Hashem Mimkomo. Blessed is the glory of God from its place. For they don't know, nor do they apprehend where His place is, as they say, for He alone is exalted and holy. Then follows the second blessing. What's this? So we say, Baruch atah Hashem, Borei Ma'orot. Blessed are you, God. You created these luminaries. You created these angels. You're awesome. The angels are awesome. The heavens, it's awesome. It's all awesome. Super awesome. What do we say after that? This is the blessing that you were trying to say earlier, Batsala. What comes after that blessing? Borei Ma'orot. HaBocher Ba'am Yisrael Ba'ahava, right? Who chooses His holy people Israel, or His people Israel with love. And He talks about all this stuff. God set aside the heavens, and He came down to us and to the patriarchs, and He gave us the Torah, and He gave us His love, His affection. He gave us a way that we could connect to Him, setting aside all of the angels. Blessed are you, God, who chooses His people Israel with love. This is what comes after the blessings. The blessing of the angels, the blessing of Borei HaMa'orot, in the introductory blessings of the Shema. Let's see here. The second blessing, with an everlasting love you have loved us, Hashem Elokeinu, God our God. That is to say that He set aside all the supernal holy hosts, and He caused His Shekhinah, His divine presence, to dwell upon us, so that He should be called Elokeinu, right? We say our God. We don't say He is God and, He's doing His thing and we're doing our thing. No, He's our God. Specifically, He's connected to us. Elokeinu, our God, means there's a connection between us and Him somehow, right? In the same sense that He is called Elokei Avraham, as has been explained earlier. We talked about this earlier. With what right do we have to say to God, we're going to connect to you with a mitzvah, or we're going to have this powerful, passionate love for you? Because in reality, on the soul level, a soul is a soul. We're all a chelek elokam mimal mamish, right? We're all a piece of God, literally. And as such, the soul of Abraham, while it's lofty and it comes from a higher place than ours does, it still has the same right or the same ability to connect to God as our soul does, right? We might have a little more schmutz in the way from letting that light shine through.
Yeah.
But that's a separate conversation altogether. So when we say Elokeinu, we mean just like God was the God of Abraham, so also is he our God. That's what we mean every time we say Elokeinu, which is pretty intense. This is because love impels the flesh. Again, you don't do anything unless you love that person or you fear that person. Therefore, this is called Ahavas Olam, the worldly love, or the love of the world. This is the lower level love we've been talking about this whole time. What is the lower level love? It's love of myself. I know that all the good things come from God, so I'm going to do good for him, and he should do good for me, and we could get along just fine, right? It's the love of the world. Either I want good stuff from God, or how do you access and awaken the eternal love, the Ahavat Olam? You meditate about God's greatness. How do you meditate about God's greatness? You think about his creation, quantitatively and qualitatively. So you see the birds, and you see the trees, and you see the rain, and you realize there's not a leaf that doesn't turn over in the wind without God's express command to do so. You say, how awesome is God? You looked at the world and awakened your love for God, right? Ahavat Olam comes from both ways. For this is the so-called contraction of his great and infinite light, taking on a garb of finitude, not infinitude, but a finite garb, a limited garb, which is called Olam, world. Interestingly enough, Olam says I believe it's in the Talmud, Olam milashon he'elam, that the word Olam comes from the word he'elam, which means concealment, right? To conceal yourself. The word world means concealment. How do you see a world? When God's light is concealed. Because if God's light was revealed, you wouldn't see the world. Interestingly enough, there's a story about the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Schneur Zalman of Liadi, the author of the Tanya here. As he was passing away, they said he passed away on the evening after Shabbat, I think it was. His sons were there. And he was looking up. He saw, you can't really see in this room, but you see some places they have you could see the beams in the ceiling, He was looking at the beam, and he says, I can't see the beam anymore. I could just see the word of God that is energizing the beam, essentially, is what moments before his passing. And so that comes to teach us, if you are seeing God's infinite light, you can't see physicality, and vice versa, right? If you're seeing the concealment, you're obviously not seeing God's infinite light.
Because that's what it conceals.
Because that's what it's concealing, right? Exactly. Like they say Yom Kippur can cover every sin except for one sin, violating Yom Kippur, right? Because if you didn't come, that's what it does, right? So he went through this tzimtzum process, God. He made this thing called Olam, world, in which he's concealed, so we don't see him, all so that we could be able to live as seemingly independent entities and tolerate his love to the amount that we can so that we're not blown away and annihilated. For the sake, why did he do it all? Of his love, of the love for his people Israel, in order to bring them near to him, that they might be absorbed into his unity and oneness. Yisborach, blessed be he. This is also the meaning of you have bestowed upon us exceedingly abounding mercy. Exceedingly abounding mercy. There's a double expression there in that blessing right there. No, it's right on that page, I believe it is. Exceedingly abounding mercy, right in the beginning, right? What is this exceedingly abundant mercy? Yeah. Chemla Gadola, right? Namely, exceeding the nearness of God towards all the hosts above. And you've chosen us. What is this exceedingly abounding mercy? That God chose us over the awesome, powerful angels who don't have this problem of concealment to the degree that we do, right? But nevertheless, he chose us from among all nations and tongues, which refers to the material body, which in its corporeal aspects is similar to the bodies of the Gentiles of the world. And you have brought us near. Remember, all creation, all man is Adam. Adam is created from what? Two pieces. What are the two pieces Adam's created from?
The elements of the world, the clay.
Right, the elements of the world, dirt, and
the breath of God.
The breath of life, right? We all are made of a body and a soul. So in that sense, it's exactly the same as the Alter Rebbe. And you brought us near that we may thank you. The interpretation of thanks here will be given elsewhere. Thanks essentially is the word hodot. It's a level of humility, right? We should acknowledge God and connect to God and proclaim your unity, to be absorbed into his unity. He is Baruch, blessed be he, as has been explained above. Wow, right? Look at all the stuff that God does for us. How much more should we love him? He hid his entire self. He put away everything that he loves and cares about. All of the expression of who he is, specifically to connect to us.
Just one more blessing before the Shalom. Blessed are you, O Lord, who chooses his people Israel with love.
That's exactly the blessing we're talking about right here. That he set aside the angels So again, the Rashba and the sages, they're talking about, why do we have these blessings before the Shema? Why are we talking about angels? Why are we talking about God loves the people? Because this is our kavana by the time we get to Shema. What should we be thinking Shema? By the time we get to the Shema, we should be fulfilling the mitzvah to love God. How do you love God? You need to think about stuff, right? You need to do the kavana. You need to have the right mind and the right heart. How do you get the right mind and the right heart? Look at all the amazing stuff in the heavens. And God threw it all aside and hid himself just so that he could be with us because he loves us. Shema, now you say Shema Yisrael. And you really do love God because you're thinking about that stuff. That's why the sages put it in. That's the answer. When the intelligent person will reflect on these matters in the depths of his heart and his brain, in your kavana, then as water mirrors the image of a face, his soul will spontaneously. This happens automatically. Again, it's human nature to reflect when someone does good for you. When someone loves you, it's human nature to love them back. That's between peers. How much more so a great person comes and does something good for you? You'll love him even more. How much more the king? How much more the King of Kings? As water mirrors the image of a face, his soul will spontaneously be kindled, and it will clothe itself in a spirit of benevolence, willingly to lay down and resolutely to abandon all that he possesses. They say one of the fundamental kavana, that you should have when you're reciting the Shema is a sense of self-sacrifice. If God asked me to take my life, I would be willing to do it at the moment of saying the Shema, because I recognize all of this stuff and more. In order only to cleave to him, Yisbarach, blessed be him, to be absorbed into his light with an attachment and a longing, and so forth in the manner of this oscultation and attachment of spirit to spirit, as has been explained earlier. We talk about before the concept of spirit to spirit, breath to breath, ruach to ruach is this concept we spoke of earlier of nishikin. Nishikin means kisses, kissing, right? That we are kissing God. How do you kiss God? When his breath becomes your breath. When my words become his words. When I'm speaking words of Torah, it's like I'm kissing God. I'm doing mitzvah, it's like I'm hugging God. But how does this attachment of spirit to spirit take place? To this end, it's stated further on, and these words shall be upon your heart. So you break down the Shema, you're looking at the Shema, it says, Shema Yisrael, I should love God. And then it says, V'yahavta, or Shema Yisrael, I recognize who God is. God is big, but at the same point, he's echad, he's everything, right? And Elokeinu, he's our God too. What happens after that? You say, V'yahavta es Hashem Elokecha. You should love the Lord your God, b'chol avavcha, with all your heart, b'chol nafshcha, with all your soul, b'chol me'odecha, with all your might. So first, I recognize who God is. Then, v'yahavta, I love him. What comes after that?
And these words.
And these words, ve'elu devarim. So, what are these words? And these words shall be upon your heart. And you shall speak of them, right? When you sit in your house, when you go out, etc., etc. It's explained in Eitz Chaim, like we said earlier, that the union of oscultation is essentially the union of Chabad with Chabad, intellect with intellect. We can't physically kiss God. That's an allegory. That's a metaphor. How do we do it? Specifically with the words that we use and with the intellect that we bring forth to the table here. That is the concentration in the Torah, God's words becoming our words. That's the kissing. While the mouth is the outlet of the breath and its emergence into a revealed state represents a category of speech engaged in by words of the Torah. For by the word that proceeded out of the mouth doth man live. However, one does not fulfill one's duty by meditation and deliberation alone, as we've expressed earlier. We have to recite the Shema, right? It does no good if you sit here and you think the Shema, right? Doesn't accomplish anything. You're not making a difference in the physical world. We're here to take the mundane physical aspects of the world and elevate to something holiness. So when we're using our muscles in our throat and we're vibrating them using the energy we ate from all of the food and everything else like that, we're elevating aspects of creation to godliness in that sense. When you think it, it doesn't affect the same way. And this is true not only in recital of the Shema and with our prayers, but as we've spoken before, also with Torah study, right? When we're getting together and people are studying Torah, there should be at least one person speaking. If you're sitting and studying Torah by yourself, you should be speaking the words of Torah. It's so much better and accomplishes so much more for the process of Tikkun Olam when we speak words of Torah. You go into a yeshiva, to a kollel.
It's noisy.
It's noisy, right? Everybody's got their study buddies, and everybody's shouting at all of these different tables, right? You walk in there, and it's like really noisy because they're arguing back and forth. They're trying to talk about everything, and it's like really, really loud. It gets you to be able to focus, a lot if you go through that for some time. So, where are we here? until one expresses the words with his lips, in order to draw down the light of the Ein Sof, the infinite one, Yisbarach, blessed be He, downward to even the vivifying soul, the animal soul, which dwells in the blood of man. If you're just sitting there thinking the words of Torah, or thinking the Shema, you're doing great things for your godly soul. But that's not the purpose. We're not here to elevate and perfect our godly soul. Our godly soul is perfect. We're here to elevate the physical aspect of ourself. What's the physical aspect of ourself? It's the animal soul, the vivifying soul, which dwells in the blood of man. As it says, the nefesh is in the blood, which is produced. How do you get more blood? By the intake of food, the mineral, the vegetable, the animal worlds, thus to raise them all to God, together with the entire universe, and cause them to be absorbed in His unity and His light, Yisbarach, blessed be He. That's Tikkun Olam, which will illuminate the world and its inhabitants in a revealed manner. And the glory of God will be revealed, and together all flesh will see. This is the Messianic redemption. For this is the purpose of the descent of all the worlds, all this tzimtzumim, all this histalshali, all of this contraction, all of God putting Himself aside, specifically so we can get down to our reality with a soul in a body, that we should take the physical stuff of the world that doesn't scream God. It's olam. It conceals God. But we make it scream God through our mitzvahs, through our tikkun olam process. This is the purpose of the descent of all the worlds, that the glory of God may pervade this world, especially in a revealed manner, to change light to darkness and bitterness to sweetness, has been explained above at length. And this is the essence of man, of people's kavana, in their service, to draw the light of the Ein Sof, Yisbarach, the blessed one, or the infinite one, blessed be He, down here below. You know, concept of a bracha. A bracha is the idea of pooling energy, right? Or taking a knee. We're trying to draw God's energy down here and pull it here so that it can be visible. It could be usable. It could be something tangible. And in modern Hebrew, a bricha is a swimming pool, right? To draw God's light down here below. However, the initiative must come through the elevation of Mayan Nukvin. Mayan Nukvin is a Kabbalistic term meaning feminine waters. The whole concept of feminine waters is in the relationship between God and humanity, that Israel is the wife and God is the husband. As such, you know, it's a very important modern topic they talk about. You know, if the man and the woman are getting together and they're going to go on a date, you know, who should pay for the date? Who should call afterwards, right? There's very important things, very important stuff. So the Talmud weighs in and says, it's the nature of man to pursue woman. It's the nature of man to pursue woman. That's how it goes. That's what we do, right? You just go pursue any woman that you find? No. The woman has to send a message saying, I'm available, I'm interested, or not, right? So how do we send a message, if we're the woman and God's the man, how do we send a message to God saying, I'm available, I'm interested, right? Mayan Nukvin. Mayan Nukvin are these feminine waters. Us sending a little message or a wink to God saying, I'm available, I'm interested. How do you do Mayan Nukvin in this world? Mitzvahs. By doing a mitzvah. By doing tikkun olam. When we do a mitzvah, we're sending a message to God, hey God, I'm available, please bless me. Right? Please come down here and be with me. That's a mitzvah. To surrender to God his soul and his possessions, as has been explained above. And that's the end of chapter 49. What do we think?
I thought that was good.
A lot of information, kind of a Kabbalistic primer, I guess you could say, so to speak, but relatively basic. What's the message of chapter 49? We call it Reciprocating Love 2.
Yeah, it's a little more sugar for making us.
That's what you brought from this? That's what you brought?
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Just
That
kidding.
was it.
The message of chapter 49 is, it's Reciprocating Love 2. Chapter 46, we said God took us out of Egypt. How much more should we be thankful to him?
Right.
Chapter 49, say God created the universe. He put his entire self aside, said he's not shining infinite glory, magnificent beauty. He's totally hidden and concealed. Why? So that we could be with him? How much more should we respond? That's chapter 49.
That's beautiful.
What do we think? Questions, comments, concerns? If you don't want to ask them, you could send me an email or a smoke signal. Whatever works. I don't read smoke
Can
signals.
you read smoke?
No. With God's help, someone will come along who does. All right, that's chapter 49. Chapter 49 is going to lead us into chapter 50, a beautiful chapter comparing the different levels of love we have for God and the fear that we have for God to the concept of silver and gold. That chesed is like silver, which is beautiful, and gevura, the awe and the respect of God that comes through the severity, right, where you understand all the particulars and you connect to God on that level, is like a love of gold as opposed to the love of silver, which is chesed. And that might be difficult for us to understand, but during the time that we're counting the Omer here, we can understand that there's a little bit of love that exists within Gevurah, and there's a little bit of Gevurah that exists within chesed, right? So that's chapter 50.
I think one of the reasons I like the Tanya so much is I like it being explained, because I remember being a little kid and saying to my mom, I would hear something at church or whatever, and I would go home and say to my mom, well, why or how? Because it sounds fanciful. And then you believe it because it's true,
I
but
could parrot lines as good as anyone else, sure.
you don't. I like being able to connect the dots and understand why I do what I do, so I don't just do it because I'm doing it or because of whatever.
That's Chabad.
I like the fact that it explains it, even though it's lofty.
Yeah, for sure.
It's so complicated is better for me than, well,
It just is.
Yeah.
Take my word for it, right?
Right.
Why? Because I said so. That's why.
It's just,
But that's the method of Chabad. That's the long, shorter way, that we should be able to take this reality that we know is true, but we can't
Right.
explain.
Now, how do you
try to
figure
explain
out-
it a little bit.
Right.
So that now I can understand it a little bit. So now I feel better about it. So now I do better about it.
Well, I think it takes it out of the lofty air of it and makes it real.
Yeah, a lot more concrete. Yeah, totally agree. Any thoughts? Who would like to close us in prayer?
I will. Avi, you are awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Help us to take, like I said, everything that we learn and help us, first of all, help us to understand it and incorporate it in our mind and in our hearts and our spirits with what we've already learned through the years, and help us to straighten it out and fix it and put it in the right way so that we can get closer to you, and help us to live our lives according to your will and your way, in Yeshua's name. Amen.
Amen. Toda Rabbi. Please join us next week for chapter 50.
Not today.
No.
Thank you. Shalom.